Hey guys, welcome back to Real Housewives Recaps. Today, you guys, I'm so excited. We are talking Dirty John. So first, I have to send a huge thank you to Amanda. Amanda, you rock. You're my favorite cutie in a ballet outfit. So Amanda is one of my patrons. She picked this episode. She produced this episode. So here we are. Thank you, Amanda. I can't wait to talk about this some more. So I'm sure you guys are familiar with Dirty John, but just in case you're not, it was based on actual events. So the actual events happened in 2014. There's a podcast about it that came out in 2017. And then the Bravo show that followed in 2018. You can now see Dirty John episodes on Netflix. So if you want to watch along, that's where they are now. You can also still find the Dirty John podcast. So I'll be referring to the show and the podcast. And man, I can't wait to talk about this all. Let's get into it. Thank you, Amanda. So I remember listening to this podcast. I was blown away. This is my third listen to the damn thing because I'm obsessed. So good. So I do recommend you start off with a podcast because, of course, they give so much more detail about what actually happened. I don't know about you, but I like to see the real people that were involved in the story. So I'm going to show you this. This is the guy, Eric Bana, that played John, and this is the real John Meehan. Not quite as good looking as Eric Bana. So John was 55. So this is the real Debra Newell, and this is her. She was played by Connie Britton, and Debra was 59 in the fall of 2014 when this took place. So the real Jacqueline chose not to put her picture out there. So this is the actress that plays Jacqueline. Now here's where things get a little confusing in the show. For whatever reason, they decided to change her name to Veronica and sometimes Ronnie. So I just want to be clear, if you hear me talk about Jacqueline, that's the real person I'm referring to. I often will go back to the podcast because, again, I'm interested in the facts of what happened. So you'll hear me call her Jacqueline, but again, I might slip up in my notes and call her Veronica or even Ronnie. So this is Debra's mother, Arlene Hart, on the left, played by Jean Smart on the right. I'm a huge Designing Women fan, so she was on that, and I loved her. She plays Debra's mother. So this might have been the biggest shocker for me, you guys. This is Tara on the left. That is her real name. In real life, that is her name on the show. Again, I don't know why they changed the other daughter's name. This is Tara on the left. The actress on the right, played by Julia Garner. So this warning is flashed at the end of the Netflix show, the first episode. I'm going to put it here just to kind of explain. Again, I'm going to refer back to the podcast quite a bit because I'm so fascinated by the true story of what happened. I will tell you honestly, the Netflix did not really stray from the podcast. It's very similar. It's probably one of the most similar stories I've seen where they do this. So we start out immediately and they intentionally vague, honestly. They do that on purpose to keep our suspense. We're getting glimpses I can't show you of blood. It's kind of a blurred image, so you're not sure if it's a man or a woman or what happened. There's a voiceover from Connie Britton about dreams. And I got to just tell you, again, having listened to the podcast so many times, Connie Britton nails Debra Newell. I mean, spot on. The way she speaks, the way she kind of, listen, I'm going to try to be not horrible about this, but Debra is very naive. That is something very clear in the podcast and in the show, and Connie Britton nails that. And I would think that would be hard to portray, but she does such a good job. So right away we get the opening credits. I have in my notes, I hate the opening credits. It's weird music, it's weird pictures. Again, it's very vague on purpose. We go right into Debra's work. So in the show, they talk about, it's called Madeira. It's like a design firm. Oh, P.S. This is, I never say her name right, Kiko. She's from Gilmore Girls. It's Lane. I love her. She's fantastic. She just looks different here because her haircut is different. But that's Lane from Gilmore Girls. Okay, back to this. Okay, so her fake business is called Madeira. But in real life, this is what she did. And it's called Ambrosia. So right off the bat, we see she's very successful. It's a huge business, and it's a design business. She's all about the way that things look. She goes on to talk about all these bad dates she's had recently, and they show kind of a montage of her on these bad dates, trying to keep herself entertained. There's just flaws in everybody, right? Like, there's something wrong with each of them. She's not attracted to them. They're not attracted to her. Whatever it is, it's just things aren't going well. We see a series of bad dates with her. And she's out there trying. And so, again, this is where the podcast kind of goes into more detail. And we'll get into this, but they do reveal she's been married 4 times before. Hello, red flag. Sorry if that applies to you. I don't mean anything by it, but that's what popped in my head. She's been married 4 times before. She has 4 children. They only talk about 2 of them in this show. We talk about Tara, and of course we talk about Jacqueline, also known as Veronica. That's going to get so confusing. I'm just going to call her Jacqueline. That's her real name. So 4 times before married. Okay. So she goes on all these bad dates. We do find out from the podcast that what actually happened is she was going on dates and she was seeing these guys that were mean to her. And the one right before John was telling her, basically said, "You're not my type, you've gained weight." I mean, just horrible things that nobody should have to deal with and be subjected to. And it's truly heartbreaking, and it kind of explains why she might be in this space, and more vulnerable, I guess is the way you'd say that. So she agrees to go on this date with John, and he shows up to the door and immediately things are off, except for, I'm sorry, I know you can't blame the victim, but Debra had her head so far up her ass, she just didn't, it's like she just doesn't see anything. Now, I say that to say, John is a con man. He's a good con man because he fooled the hell out of her, but he's also a bad con man because the daughters kind of saw through it from the beginning. Now, let me just go on a tangent here and say the daughters. Okay. On the podcast, I really like the daughters. Jacqueline is feisty. She's looking out for her mom. She's ballsy. I don't know what the word is. And Tara is very sweet and timid, and she seemed kind, and that's how people described her. They did a good job on Tara on this, show or whatever, but Jacqueline, they took a quality of hers, which was to be like, I guess, again, all I keep going to is ballsy. I know that's not the right word, but where she's no nonsense, I guess is the word. But this actress drove me kind of nuts. She's over the top. It's too much. And actually, when I was researching this and reading people's reviews and stuff, that was the thing I read the most, is that the daughter Jacqueline really, it was too much. She was too bratty, bitchy, whatever you want to call it. It's just too much. And that's kind of what I remember too. Okay, I'm talking over this part. Basically what happened is they met for this dinner date. He shows up super casual. Things were weird at the house when he picked her up, but they got better. They went to dinner. They had a nice time. They were kissing. They went back to her house. Things were happening. They were kissing. She excuses herself. She's like looking at herself in the mirror, having a pep talk. When she comes out, he's hopped into her bed, and he's talking about how soft her mattress is. Well, she gets kind of weirded out and says she prefers to stay in the living room. And he says, "I wasn't trying to scare you." And she says, "Okay, but let's go in the living room." He rolls over, he sighs. He visibly does not want to get out of this bed. It's like, again, in the podcast, they go more into it. They assume that he's homeless or living somewhere, maybe his car, something like that. And so the idea of the bed is so appealing, it's hard for him to get up. So she finally says, will you come in here now, please? Like, will you get out of my room? Will you come into the living room? He doesn't want to get up. She feels very weird, and he walks out with no words. Again, this show is matching up to exactly what they say on the podcast. I don't mean to keep referring back, but I just want to know the differences and what the real truth is, and that's exactly what she said happened. She says, very weird. She saw a weird side of him that first night, and it clearly made her uncomfortable. So I'm going to fill in a little bit more detail because, again, I get it from the podcast versus the show. We find out here that he was married. I'm sorry. No. Yes, he was married. He has 2 kids. She's been married 4 times. She has 4 children. And she's convinced herself she wants to try again. She's excited because she's found John, who she finds very attractive. He's saying to her that he's a physician. John Michael Meehan, that's his name. Okay. Again, he hooked her by saying, "You're so my type." The last guy happened to tell her, "You are not my type." She was living in Irvine, and they met at her penthouse for the dinner. Again, John was 55. Okay. So that night she goes, it was a bad date. The next day, she's looking around. She's working at her design firm. She's working late. She gets a phone call from him. Again, this is true to the story. He calls her up and he explains himself. He explains himself in a way to where he basically, I like you so much. You're too good to be true. I don't know what to do with myself. Just that BS line that I'm sure we've all fallen for at some point. They just know the right thing to say. And she falls for it. And it's uncomfortable and you're like screaming at your TV, "No, Debra, don't do it." But she does. She starts to warm back up to him. Okay, so this is where the show differed from the podcast a little bit. Immediately in episode 1, we do see John at work as an anesthesiologist. Now, in the podcast, we get to hear that he's an anesthesiologist, but we don't actually see or hear anything about his work just yet. That happens later because we find out some terrible things, but they're hinting at it here in this episode. This poor woman is they don't say exactly what it is, but she references some sort of cancer. She refers to her mom as having ovarian, so it could be that. She's crying. She's upset. He does sit down and try to comfort her and tells her, "This is a pothole. We're going to get back on the road of the rest of your life. Where's that smile?" So we see that he can be charming. Obviously, he gives us chills up our spine and he's full of shit, but that's where I just found it interesting. Now, Debra goes on another date with John. She's talking about her kids. She especially focuses on Tara and it says in my notes Veronica, but it's actually Jacqueline. Tara and Jacqueline. She says she only gives them money when they ask for it. So this is something that comes up a lot. She has so much money. She lives in this beautiful penthouse. She's a very successful business. Jacqueline talks a lot about her Birkin bags. She talks about it in the podcast. She talks about it in the show. She likes her bags. So she even has a safe for them, which comes up in a little bit. So on this date, John behaves himself a little better. He realizes he stepped too far. And he says, "I'm sorry. I don't want to make the same mistake as last time. I will see you for a date on Thursday." And he leaves right then, so that way it doesn't cross any lines again, and so she feels comfortable. So it worked. She's falling for him. We go over to the counselor's office. Jacqueline is telling the counselor that things don't add up with John. Okay. Again, this is where this actress drives me crazy. She's over the top. She's a brat. I understand that we can see the full picture and that she's actually right, but she just comes across awful here. Now, in the podcast, again, very similar. They did go to counseling, and this is something that they kind of danced around, but they did explain that, basically, to quote Patty Stanger from $1 Million Matchmaker, she has a bad picker. Her picker is off. She's been married 4 times. She's had a string of really shitty boyfriends, and the daughters bring that they bring that up in counseling, and the counselor is trying to, how could she possibly know, right, that we're dealing with Dirty John? She's trying to help. She's trying to help Debra find her voice, because Debra's kind of a pushover with things. And let's face it, she's naive, right? I don't want to say she's not that bright. She's naive, and she falls for everything. Like, it's very interesting to watch, actually. But the counselor's saying your mother is entitled to be happy, whatever that means to her. Okay, then we go over to this kissing montage. They're playing loudly, "I Put a Spell on You," clearly indicating what's going on here. They end up having sex, and he's telling her stories of Iraq and people that they lost along the way, and they're talking about scars and things like that. Okay, so again, back to the podcast. The podcast goes further into this. He tells her that he served in Iraq, and that he worked with Doctors Without Borders. So this is going to come up again later, but this is like where these seeds start get planted here. Okay. So things get real weird real fast, right? They've slept together. He's over at the house. Veronica, again, sorry, that is Jacqueline, opens the safe to get her purse. This is something that really happened. She tries to get a purse out of there. She keeps him in there. He's lingering in the door, and he says, "Hey, kiddo, what you got in that safe?" Oh, my God, you guys. I got chills even just saying that line back to you guys. Could you imagine this weirdo your mom's hooking up with saying that in your home like the first night he slept over? What the hell? So, again, this is where the show pissed me off because Veronica is like, why is he sleeping over? She throws a tantrum. She ends up throwing a ball on the ground. It's a little bit much. It's, a little bit teenage angst for me. But to her point, John's a freaking weirdo. So she's completely freaked out by all this. Debra says, oh, yeah, she told John to pick up this tux for this cancer benefit, right? And he's like kind of hesitant about it. So then we go to this actual benefit where Debra is dressed to the nines. She looks stunning. She's waiting and waiting for John to show up. He shows up and he's in his scrubs. And again, this is something that they talk about in the podcast. He always dressed very messy, they said. And they refer to him as almost college frat guy a lot. And when all else fails, he would just wear scrubs everywhere. So he wore scrubs to this cancer benefit. He excused it with saying that he had been stuck and he was working on, I forget, some surgery and stuff. So she ends up dismissing it too. And, it was a emergency laparotomy is what he says. And then he lost his phone charger and couldn't call. And they show the night, though. They're drinking, they're having champagne. She seems to be so happy, having the best time. He's giving her the attention that she's looking for, right? They go home and he says, "You were the belle of the ball." He kisses her and she kind of pulls away from him and he's suspicious and he's like, "Hey, what's going on? What's wrong?" Well, this is where she comes clean and says, I was married before. Well, I was actually married 4 times. I've been embarrassed to tell you. There's a lot of history there. She says there's a lot of blood under that bridge. Well, he then takes this opportunity to say, well, you were brave to tell me this, so I'm going to be brave and tell you I love you. You guys, red flag, red flag. Now I'm going to tell you a little story about my parents. My parents met on a blind date, got engaged after a week, and they've been married for oh my God, 40 something years. How crazy is that? So yes, it does happen. I've seen it happen. But you guys, come on, red flag, right? I mean, I know it happened for my parents, but I couldn't live like that. That's crazy. To have somebody say I love you that fast, it's a lot. But maybe it happens. I don't know. Okay, montage of dates. They're loudly playing Gwen Stefani. I hate that song. Believe me, I love Gwen Stefani. It's nothing against that. I just had this boss that used to have that as a ringtone and it drove me crazy. Okay, so they're looking at places together. And she finds this place. They keep talking about Balboa, I believe they say. It's a bayfront property. And again, on the podcast, I go more into it. This place is $6,500 a month. And he says, oh, I would totally pitch in for this place. I'd take care of it, but I have tax issues and child support. And, it's just not going to work out. And she's like, don't worry, I got it. So we see her make this phone call and she says, I can, I'll go ahead and pay a year. It's fine. I'll pay it in cash. No problem. So it's interesting to see her take charge of this. She clearly has the money. It's no problem. So there we see Veronica dressed like a unicorn. She's being a brat. Her mom, Debra, is saying, listen, she can't tell her that she's going to move in with John. Instead, she says, listen, you take this place. There's 4 months left on the lease. I want to make this therapy between us work out right. And the therapist says we should have boundaries. You take this place. I'm going to go move somewhere else. She totally doesn't mention the John thing. It's going to be fine. So then we go over to the new place where they're toasting champagne and they flash big on the screen 5 weeks. That's how long they've known each other, 5 weeks. So during this happy toasting of champagne, we do flash back to his patient that we saw before, trying to recover, but she's in so much pain, it's hard to watch. So again, this is where the TV show kind of takes a little different timeline than the podcast did, but again, very related because they do get into that, which we will get into along the way, what he's actually doing. It's awful. I mean, he's the devil. He's so much worse than you could even imagine. I'm sure you already know what's happening, but just in case, I'm going to build up the suspense a little bit and say he is the absolute devil. So from here, we get to see our first glimpse of Tara. Tara, we find out, is a huge dog lover. She is huge into animals in general. She's talking about becoming a veterinarian. She's taking a walk with her boyfriend, Jimmy. They are headed to Debra's new place. So she's going that way, and so this is something real from the podcast, is that Tara loves zombie things. Anything zombie. Walking Dead, I believe. I've never seen any of that, but she's super into all that. So they actually talk about it here because it does come up later. But when they get to Debra's place, they see John, and John is just, he's a dick right off the bat. They're like, hey, I'm Tara, this is Jimmy. And he's like, oh, I thought you were getting here at 5. And they say, oh, no, we got off a little early. We wanted to come say hi and meet you. And is my mom here? No, she went to get turkey. Maybe you should take a walk with your dog. So what really happened on the podcast is he was there. He was a dick. They were there, and I believe another family member was there. And he was trying to show off for Debra and carry all these things by himself so that way he could act like, I'm doing all this work, Tara, and Jimmy didn't really help me, kind of drive a wedge in the family. We've heard it. That's what abusers do. It's just awful. We go to later. She hooks up with her mom. They give hugs. Tara has a sore, so her mom takes her into the bathroom and puts cream on the sore. It's kind of vague, but it's an excuse to get her into the bathroom. And she looks around and says, why is all of John's stuff here? And Mom kind of dismisses it and says, well, he stays over sometimes, and it's nice for him to have some of his things here. And Mom then invites Tara to stay over for Thanksgiving. Tara says that she would, but she really wants to go hang out with Jacqueline for a while. So then we go to Tara talking to Jacqueline about how weird John is. And Jacqueline tells her all about that safe thing where he's like, what you got in the safe, kiddo? And how they're just not going to deal with him. Tara is reading out loud about how to shave a poodle. It just, again, plays into, it's very Tara. If you listen to the podcast, again, I'm obsessed with this podcast, so do go listen. Tara is just she's just totally different than Jacqueline. Jacqueline seems more, like a reality show contestant. You know what I mean? Like you'd see her on The Bachelor pushing her way to the front saying, I'm the greatest, date me. Whereas Tara is more of a meek, kind of quiet, kind of has Debra's mannerisms almost, whereas I don't know if I want to use the word pushover, but kind of like that, right? Okay, so back to Debra. She's saying, oh, these apples are rotten. I need fresh apples to make whatever she's making. And John says he'll go, but, maybe Tara should go. So again, creating that wedge, the family dynamic. She's like, well, she would, but she's over with Jacqueline right now. And he says, well, maybe you should say to your kids, I'm done doing everything for you. Maybe put yourself first. So it's under the guise of taking care and looking out for Debra, but he's being a dick. So Tara tells Jacqueline about how he had toiletries everywhere in Mom's bathroom, and that she's afraid that he's moved in. And that's where Jacqueline's encouraging her, you just have to snoop around. You have to figure out what's going on. So from here, Tara goes through and goes into the closet, pulls pictures out of John with some kids, and then he finds a master's in nursing degree. So in the podcast, they do talk about this. She says she was not snooping. She did find this degree where it's in nursing. And she said, I didn't know about the medical field. I thought maybe while he was waiting to become a doctor, he did this too. She didn't really understand it. But just like in the podcast and in the show here, basically Debra dismisses it and says, oh no, he's not living here. I'm just getting this stuff framed for him. Well, Tara sees through the bullshit and they're yelling at each other and John walks in and John really freaks her out. Again, she talks about this in an interview, how he was overbearing. He's a foot taller than her. Her boyfriend had a broken hand, so he couldn't be much help. And she got scared because he immediately got aggressive with her. And she's trying to have a conversation with her mom, and mom's not listening. She's trying to say, how are you going to let your boyfriend talk to your daughter like this? He's lying to you, Mom. Can you hear me? And mom's just totally, this is where she drove me crazy. Debra has her head up her ass so hard. She's not paying attention. She can hear, but she's not doing anything about it. She's like love-struck teenager or something like that, where it's just, you cannot talk reason into him. Okay, so the boyfriend and Tara leave. Ronnie gets to Thanksgiving. Again, I'm sorry, it's Jacqueline/Ronnie. That's where we meet Grandma. Of course, played by Jean Smart. Now, there is a whole huge story coming about Grandma, and we do hear it more in the podcast. They gently touch on it this episode, but they get into it more later. But let me just tell you, Grandma, this is hard to talk about. So she had another daughter that was Debra's sister. I believe it's Debra's older sister, and I can't go into too many details, but it was severe domestic abuse, and the husband ended up taking her out, basically. And yet, we find out later that the Debra's mom, the grandma, testified on his behalf in court. So this is a fucked up family. I don't know. I mean, it is. That's just what my gut says to say. So I'm going to tell you the truth of how I feel. This is a fucked up family. So much is going on. John he calls her Ronnie, which is her nickname for Veronica, again, real name Jacqueline, and says, hey, could you and I go for a walk? I want to have a little talk. And he's pretending to want to clear the air. Well, again, in the podcast, Jacqueline addresses this and said, this really did happen, but he sent word through like her cousin or something that he wanted to take her behind into a little alley and have a talk with her. And she said, F no. If you have something to say to me, you say it in front of everybody. And it just pissed him off. So he didn't have anything to say to her. And she says, I don't have anything to say to you, and told her mom, don't sit me next to him. Whew, so creepy. How does the mom not say, what the hell? Like, why are you trying to take my kid for a walk? Why is she so broken? I don't understand this at all. Okay. John is playing the nice guy, pretending like he wants to fix it with Jacqueline. Clearly he's lying. Okay. Then we flash to, this is where the show kind of bugs me. They have to jump around because of timeline issues and getting through the story, but we see them set up the Christmas tree. It's closer to Christmas. She has a work trip that she's got to go on. He surprises her with a special ornament. It says Debra and John on it. She's got this work trip in Vegas, and something happened where somebody that was supposed to drive got sick, so he said, well, I'll drive the van. I'll take you to Vegas. He's very excited to do this. They go to Vegas. We see them, again, it's a montage of them having romantic evenings, drinking, gambling, all the things you do in Vegas, right? Sightseeing, all that stuff. And they're playing the song, Something Tells Me I'm Into Something Good. Well, when they're drinking, he starts talking about his last name versus her last name and the logistics of that. And he's kind of feeling her out, and she's kind of getting looser about it and says, yeah, I might marry you. And so you guys, that's what happens. They go get married right there. And this is straight out of what really happened. She said it was kind of not planned. He did accompany her on this trip. He kind of put the pressure on, but she didn't really stop it. And she wore, I believe she said, like a white pantsuit, something, classy and elegant. And he wore this, cargo pants, whatever, what you'd wear to go to Home Depot on a Saturday. I don't know. And so, Hi, red flags. So, again, she's classy, he's sloppy. That's just something that they kept talking about in the podcast. They get married, they're happy. We get a flash on the screen. 8.5 weeks. That's how long they were together. And right at the end of this episode, we go back to that patient who is in excruciating pain. And I hate that part so much. It breaks my heart. Oh my gosh, you talk about a heck of a first episode of a show, of a podcast, whatever we're talking about here, of it all. This was it. I have chills talking about it now. I've seen it and I know what happens, but it's so good to dive back into this stuff. I'm so excited. Amanda, I can't thank you enough for picking this. Fantastic choice. I really appreciate you. It means so much, but you guys, 8.5 weeks. So that is it for the first episode. Amanda has requested that I keep going. So guys, that's what we're going to do. We're going to do 1 episode a month and we're going to finish this thing out. And I'm so excited to be into it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you're enjoying it. And let me know in the comments what you think. I have so much I want to know. Tell me everything. Do you agree with me? Is Debra just completely nuts? I mean, what are your thoughts? Did you watch this when it was going on in real time? Are you into it now? Have you seen the Betty Broderick one? I just really want to know your thoughts on all this. It's so interesting to dive into. So I hope you guys have a fantastic day, and I appreciate each and every one of you so much, and I will talk to you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.